Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to the afternoon session of this Intercultural Cities Australasia Network Summit. My name is Bobby Mehta, and before we begin with this afternoon's events, I'd like to hand over to Nikki Foy to do a welcome to country.
Thank you, Bobby. Oh, bear with me. Thank you. Nagata Natamwa Nikki Foy. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Deanne Gilson for her lovely and insightful welcome that she did this morning at our morning session. Thank you, Deanne. My name is Nikki Foy, nee Smith. I was a Smith. And I sort of say there's two types of people in the world. There are Smiths and there's wannabe Smiths. I was a Smith. But before I was a Smith, I have strong blood and family genes running through my veins. I'll read those names out because they are so important to me and I honour them. I have the names Habe, Harrison, Arden, Lancaster and Foster. They are all my family. I stand here, a proud Gunjamara Watchabolik woman who has lived and grown up on Wadawurrung country all my life. I acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land we are gathered on today, the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge all Aboriginal people who have cared for and taken care of country whilst living off their traditional lands. I acknowledge all Aboriginal people here today and all those who are watching from other parts of the nation and from around the world. I acknowledge and thank our Aboriginal activists, leaders who have paved the way to where we are today and for making it possible for me to be able to stand here today, a strong, proud and connected Aboriginal woman. Their bravery, courage and activism lives within me and drives who I am today, and to always strive to do better to improve the lives and living conditions of Aboriginal people. And in the spirit of reconciliation, being able to understand, to spread the message to non-Aboriginal people in this country that our Aboriginal history is their history. It is everybody's history. I would like to finish up with a message of responsibility to us all and visitors living and working on country and around the nation. We are all caretakers of this land. Tread carefully and respectfully and take what you need and give back when you can. And the land will care for us. Thank you and enjoy this afternoon's summit.
Thank you very much, Nikki Foy, for that wonderful and stirring, always very moving, grounding and thought-provoking. Thank you, Nikki. That was wonderful. Now, I'm really looking forward to this afternoon because this afternoon we've got a fantastic panel discussion coming away and we're going to have some intercultural conversations. And to help us do that this afternoon, we're joined by a panel of a few exceptional people from here in Ballarat. And I say a few because we're blessed in Ballarat to have a lot of exceptional people. So I'm going to do a brief introduction, but before I do, I just want to also acknowledge the fact that Ballarat was Australia's first intercultural city, and we became the first intercultural city in 2017 in Australia. And I'd like to take the opportunity to extend a special welcome to all the intercultural city members present or watching online today, especially Melitopol in the Ukraine, and also Australasia's intercultural cities of Melton, Maribyrnong, Salisbury in South Australia, Logan in Queensland, Hamamatsu in Japan, and Auckland in New Zealand. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to everybody around the world. So, to our panel members, and it's wonderful to be here amongst these 5 exceptional people. And I'm going to start off by introducing them. So as I say the name, I might just ask our panel members to raise their hands so you know exactly who I'm talking about. And we're going to kick off with Mita Nasi. Now, Meeta is of Indian descent, and both her maternal and paternal parents migrated from India to South Africa. And Meeta migrated to Australia with her husband and her son in 1998, so 23 years ago. Now, in the past 12 years, she was the secretary and president of the Ballarat Indian Association, a former multicultural ambassador, and current intercultural advisor for the city of Ballarat. And in 2014, she received a Victorian Multicultural Award for excellence for her service to the community, as well as for her outstanding voluntary contribution to the multicultural community in Ballarat. And we're very privileged and blessed to have Meeta here with us here today. So thank you, Meeta, for joining us and being part of this panel. Lunafair Kojo Folly, I'm not used to calling you that because to his friends and to the people who know him well, he's known simply as Luna. Luna is also a very inspirational young man. He came to Australia via a Togolese-based refugee camp and settled into Ballarat on arrival. After joining Ballarat's multicultural community as a volunteer, he's undertaken a number of different roles here in the city. He's been a youth officer for the Ballarat African Association and the Ballarat Regional Multicultural Council. He's a diversity leader in the Ballarat multicultural community with a passion for sport, using sport as a platform to advocate for those who are disadvantaged. Amongst all of that, he also finds time to be a coach and a player for the Sebastopol Vikings Football Club. And having seen him play, I can vouch for the fact that he's very, very talented on and off the pitch. So welcome to you, Luna. Sitting to my left, we've got Chez Dichiera. Chez migrated with his family at a young age from Italy to Australia, settling in Mildura, and then realising that Ballarat would be a better place. He's been in Ballarat since 1969, where he studied civil engineering at SMB. After a career as an engineer and regional manager for the Victorian Department of Labour, he set up his own occupational health and safety consulting business. A member and an active member at that of the Italian Association, including 16 years as president and member and past chairman of the Ballarat Regional Multicultural Council, Chez has also served on the City of Ballarat Intercultural Advisory Committee and Harmony Festival Committee. He likes to keep busy, don't you, Chez? So a big round of applause for Chez. We've got Ita. Ita Rahmawati is also joining us today on the panel. Now, Ita's from Jakarta in Indonesia, and she moved to Ballarat in December 2015. She's passionate about her Islamic religion and understanding other cultures. She's also an active member of the Islamic Society of Ballarat and participates in improving the facilities at the local Ballarat Mosque. Ita is a current intercultural ambassador for the city of Ballarat. As am I. I should have given a bit of an introduction to myself, but we'll do that at the end because I'm not that important. These guys are. And Ita also has a wide variety of people working with her, and she really plays an active role in this community as well. And, you know, it's so pleasing to see people who are not only here in Ballarat for many years, but people such as Ita, who's only been here since 2015. And in that short period of time has also demonstrated the ability and the passion to really work closely with other cultures. So a big round of applause and a welcome to you, Ita. And last by no means least, at the end there, we've got Karissa Cribbis. Karissa is a biracial Chinese Australian who moved to Australia with her dad in 2005 and moved to Ballarat in 2010. Now, through her high school years, she started volunteering for the Centre for Multicultural Youth and has also sat on their youth advisory group. Michaela Settle's advisory group, she sat on as well, and the Regional Advisory Council for the Victorian Multicultural Commission, so also keeping very busy. Through these groups, she's advocated for mental health, intersectionality, and the highlighting of young voices, very, very important. This advocacy has also been present through her work as a youth equality advocate with Women's Health Grampians and as a youth facilitator for the City of Ballarat's Youth Services team. Welcome to you, Karissa. Now, the way we're going to proceed with this discussion or this conversation is I've got a number of questions, but rather than asking you all the same questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a few of you to answer some questions. That way we'll be able to get through more questions and hopefully get some more insights into your experiences and how you found Ballarat, and also your views about the future of Ballarat and how you envisage things changing, or how you think you would like to see things changing here in Ballarat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kick off starting from left to right by asking you all to maybe take a minute or two just to give us a brief introduction to yourselves. What led to you being here in Ballarat? What was the driver behind that move? And just a bit of context to your being here today and what brought you here. So Chez, we'll start with you.
What drove me obviously was to come to Ballarat to study engineering, and Mildura and Ballarat are on the same train line, so it was quite easy for me to jump on a train and get out the Ballarat railway station at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was very simple, didn't have to have a car. So I came here to study civil engineering, and I really liked the place. You know, it's Mildura is a fairly hot place. It's warm, and Ballarat has four seasons, where Mildura is only 2, hot and cold. And but I soon settled into the town. You know, putting my head down to study engineering, and made a lot of friends. Got to know the town fairly well, and ended up marrying a local girl, and we settled here, and spent pretty well most of my working life here in Ballarat, but working out of Ballarat because I set up a consulting business in the 90s, which took me pretty well throughout Victoria and Australia and internationally, doing my health and safety consulting. And in early 2000, I was introduced to Italians. Believe it or not, I didn't know there were a lot of Italians in Ballarat, but my wife introduced me to the Italian Association. Within a year, I became president.
Wow.
And finished last year, 2020, and got to know the Italian community really well. 2 years ago, we wrote a book about Italians in Ballarat and their contribution. Italians in Ballarat are very settled. They are now in a position to be able to support emerging communities, which I can talk about later. So, yeah, my time here has been quite pleasant, yeah, and made a lot of friends, and I'll probably die here, I guess.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And it's great because everybody has their own journey. And I really like the fact that starting as a new community and now being in a position to support emerging communities, really quite a special scenario. So thank you for that, Chez. Mita, how about yourself?
Thanks, Bobby. Like I said, I'm from South Africa. I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in an era of apartheid. So my schooling was not the best. And when I finished my schooling, I studied, and I was seeking employment. And it was difficult for me to find employment because of the era of apartheid. But eventually, I did find something. I worked, and eventually, it was time to get married. I got married. And then we had a young child, and we were unsure of our livelihood in South Africa in terms of safety and what the future really holds. So we took the step. We said, okay, let's move to Australia and come to Ballarat. So we came to Ballarat, and I got a lovely welcome to Ballarat. The lovely weather, the cold weather. It was gloomy and wet when we initially came. And it was a shock to me because I came from a warmer climate. So adjusting to the climate of Ballarat, it took some time, but we found our place. And like every migrant, we all have challenges. I had my share of challenges too. I walked around Sturt Street, and, you know, I should always say, there's no one that really looks like me, you know. And then when my son was schooling, he may have been the only Indian student in class at that time. So those were the differences we found at that time. And slowly, we've managed our challenges, and we made Ballarat our home. And I've been here over 20 years. And in time, when Ajit was in school, I volunteered my time at school, and I found my place, a sense of belonging and connectivity and friendship. And I've been volunteering ever since with government and non-for-profit organization in Ballarat. It's been challenging times in Ballarat. Things have changed. And when we came, there was no real help for us. Well, today, there is help. There are other associations that are helping migrant communities, you know. So they feel that little bit of, you know, assistance, a self-belonging, which we did not have. It's lovely to see that improvement now in Ballarat. Things have changed. There is more room for improvement, which we will talk later about.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Meeta. And the really important part of that message that really resonates with me is we often look at new people arriving in Ballarat and we really focus on the issues they face here in Ballarat, but often there's a story before that as well. So that struggle or that, you know, difficulty that they face in adapting here in Ballarat is not new for them. It's actually a continuation of a difficult time that they've experienced before they've arrived in Ballarat. So thank you for that, Meeta. That was really interesting. Ita, tell us about your story.
Yes, thank you, Bobby. I like the questions because it brings back the memory of me, the sweet and the sadness of it, because I left my home country, Indonesia, in 2015 because I met the love of my life. So I decided to move to Australia, especially to Ballarat, because my husband is the Creswick-born man. And it was a really big decision that I took. I used to be a career woman in Jakarta. I love my busy life. And I moved here with my son. He was 4 years old at that time. And both of us really, really knew with this environment. But as soon as we arrived here in Ballarat, it's lovely. It's really different. It's bring a vibrance that, because I used to, since I was a teenager, I used to had a dream that I want to live overseas. I have a passionate learning other people's culture, other language. I studied German in university. And then, to be honest, Australia has never been my dream, but here I am. It's because I found the man that I love. And, but also it's bring back memory when I left my parents at that time. And it was a hard decision, but I came here with a big hope, with dreams, and it's true, it's changed my life. I met a real nice people here in Ballarat. The first year was so hard, and I think that's every migrant background people feel the same. They feel, at the first start, they feel with this strange language, you know, because we're not speaking English. And with the build up the confidence to meet locals. But I was really grateful because if it's not my husband who browsed City of Ballarat Council and what's the program they have for migrants, I would probably never sit here. So yeah, thank you so much for welcome for us, and really looking to, you know, to help people who settled in their first year moving, especially in Ballarat.
Thank you, Ita. And again, for me, the message I'm getting loud and clear, and she said it a few times, is sometimes we concentrate on the differences, but at the end of the day, we're all humans, and there's that common theme about the things that are precious to us, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a feeling of connection that can make us move many thousands of kilometres. And to our next story, which Luna, I'm sure, is going to tell us, and Luna is someone who's used that common passion, something that a lot of us love and that can bring people together in sport. So Luna, tell us about your story.
Yeah, so my story is a little different because I was extremely young when we first came over here. So first living back there, you know, went to school, came back, we were in a refugee camp, and then the next day we were off on a plane. And back then, you know, being a young African kid with my other group of friends, you know, we thought that getting on a plane and going somewhere, we thought Australia was a city in the clouds, basically, you know. So we had this extremely high expectation that, you know, we were going to live somewhere up in the clouds and it was going to be amazing. Which, you know, for a little kid, you have a lot of imaginations and a lot of thoughts. And we first got here, we landed in Melbourne and then got on a bus. We were in the city, so we were looking around. There was, giant buildings. Every window was reflecting. It was a completely different experience. And then the bus just kept driving. And it just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. Got to the point where there was nothing but trees, and it just kept going. And I think it was one of my older brothers who was like, "So is this city really in the clouds, or or is it in the bush?" And at the time we didn't really think much of it, but we got to Ballarat midwinter, and as the difference was huge in terms of the weather. Mum couldn't go outside at all for weeks at a time because she's really sensitive with the weather, even till this day. So it was a pretty different, unique experience. But once we first got here, the start is always the hardest, like they've previously mentioned. Trying to connect with friends and go to school, and without knowing the language. We were in an ESL class at MacArthur Street, which is pretty good because they put a lot of the other refugees and migrants there as well at the time, which made it easier to connect with people, from similar places to you and experiencing similar things as well. And then a year from that, we, everyone kind of scattered into different schools, and we went to Reden. And at that time as well, I was walking home from school one day, and one of the soccer clubs was along the way on the left side, Ballarat Soccer Club at the time, who were called Red Devils. And one of the coaches was like, "Oh, you look like you might be interested. Do you want to come have a kick?" And in Africa, we did have a kick with all the kids and stuff, but we never played for clubs. And like where we're from, there wasn't clubs and stuff like that. So there was nothing like that where you could constantly go and train and meet new people and interact with the young kids. So, I had nothing else to do at home. I was like, sure, I had a kick. And, I was just having a kick. People were extremely welcoming. Like, kids are really welcoming though, because they don't really know much. So they were really welcoming. And then later on, the coach of that team basically became like a mentor to me, or later in life. And from there, that's where I really made connections, even till this day. A lot of players from that same team back in under nines, I think it was. I still, speak and talk to them this day and hang out with them, which, is something Ballarat really does offer, if you just know how to find it and how to find the right space. And from then I went into, volunteering with CMY. Well, first I was at Cedar. I was schooling at Cedar because I was really interested in sport, wanted to be a personal trainer, wanted to be, head coach. So I was studying my sports diploma, and they were like, you had to do placement. And I was like, placement, what do I do? Where do I go? I'm not really sure. So I went on placement with CMY, because they've done a few school programs when I was at Phoenix, and I really enjoyed those programs. They were really amazing programs, and they really got us connected to the community. And when I was on placement, they needed an MC for an event called Rock the Block, which, back then I was terrified of in public speaking. Just standing up on stage would have been a no. At first I said no. 2 weeks later, like, they just kept pushing me, and I gave in and did it. And I think it went well. The weather wasn't well on the day, but the event itself went really well. People loved it, and then from then on, they gave me a youth facilitator role. And from that role, I thought I came through this program, and growing up, what do I think the Ballarat community needs the most? And one thing was that a lot of the young multicultural guys didn't really have a space to hang out or talk or really learn much with what services they are, if they need support with this or that or mental health. So me and Barry, who was the team leader, came up with a program called Young Men's Group. And what that did was got a lot of the multicultural guys together. When we first started, we were getting like almost 30 guys together, and we would do an activity, but immediately after that activity, we would do like respectful relationship programs, mental health programs, where they were actually learning this stuff, but also we were bringing in services like Ballarat Community Health where they could, learn that those services provide support, and you can go there for, certain help and stuff like that, which is really good. So, yeah, and I feel like doing all that's really connected me into the community, and a lot of those guys from those programs I still see around today who, are doing a lot better off now than, they might have without it. So it's been a long ride, and yeah, definitely happy I came to Ballarat.
Thanks for that, Luna. And you can forgive him for thinking that this might be a place in the clouds when you look at the weather out there, seeing as we're surrounded by them today. But thank you for that. And Karissa, finally.
Yeah, I guess, I didn't really have a choice in coming to Ballarat. Just not that it's bad, not that I wouldn't choose to live here. But my dad lived in China and met my mum, and then he was the general manager for a golf course, and that contract finished up, so he moved back to Australia, and my mum was still in China. We lived in the Melbourne suburbs, and then he just travels a lot for work, so he saw Ballarat and liked the vibes, and moved here. So yeah, I've been here since 2010 and have just gone through school and stuff like that. And same as Luna, I got involved in the Centre for Multicultural Youth, and that really changed my life just because I met some really good people. My dad, he was supporting us by himself, so he was obviously working a lot. And I kind of just found a space where I had like a role model or like just an adult figure that I could rely on in that space. And so I just constantly kept going there, and that opened up a lot of other opportunities, as Bobby said earlier, just with Women's Health Grampians and the City of Ballarat in their youth facilitator role.
Thank you, Karissa. Okay, so again, that really strong, resounding message of connection and community. And what that says is really, if we take anything away from today, the way we can really help new people settling into a city is by being that friendly face, that helpful face, that person that you can go to find out more about where you live, where you can access services that maybe we take for granted, but where our new arrivals, maybe for them, it's so difficult to understand where to access these services. Okay, and that was a consistent theme about the connection and the power of that connection and really what we can do. Thank you for that. Chez, I might start the questions with yourself and then also Mita. So I'll ask a pair of you, seeing as you've been in Ballarat for a considerable period of time now. Chez, are there any challenges that you still see here on a day-to-day basis? I mean, obviously you would have seen a lot of change over the last 20-odd years, but what are the challenges that you can still see here in Ballarat? Just briefly.
From my point of view, I feel like a bit of an interloper because I'm part of a very well settled migrant community, but there are challenges. I mean, for older people that English is not their first language, they definitely have a challenge in deliberating on a daily basis, looking for housing or employment. So language is a real problem. I know with my parents, my father was fairly good because he had to deal with businesses, but Mum couldn't speak a word in English. But she still managed. She'd go, once a week, she'd go shopping, come back with a basket full of food, and hopefully she got the right change. So, so there are still pockets of new arrivals in Ballarat that are struggling with accommodation, with a little bit of discrimination in the real estate business. My wife and I have worked with a few people in that field and helped to get accommodation and housing. It's been fairly difficult because often you don't have a track record. So language, employment, basically the two main, accommodation, shelter and employment are real challenges for people. I haven't experienced that, but I know that Ballarat needs to. Yeah,
sure. And you mentioned there about your mother not speaking the language here. Now, did that mean for you as a younger Chez, did you have to grow up a lot more and fill that void a little bit more? Do you think that youngsters who are coming to Ballarat now are also having to do
No,
that?
we lived in the country. We go to school and then go back to our fruit block. We grew grapes and so forth. And we didn't, I guess my elder sisters filled that role. As young boys, we'd love going to school and got into cricket and got into football, made that connection. Hardly experiencing any discrimination, which is really interesting for, yes, other people have faced that, but we connected fairly quickly. But I didn't feel the pressure to go and translate for my mum because it wasn't really necessary. Yeah.
Okay, good. Mita, same question to you.
Yeah,
I mean, again, you would have seen heaps of change, not just within the last 20 years, but I mean, Ballarat's evolving so quickly.
That's
Within, 12 months, you see such a change. So tell us about some of the challenges that you still see here.
Yeah, I would agree with Chez saying on the language, because I know I come from an English-speaking background, so English was not a problem for me speaking English. I know lots of people, they are having difficulty, especially migrants, because English is not the first language, so they do have difficulty communicating. And for instance, if they go to a supermarket, like Chez said, they're going to have difficulty reading the labels, purchasing the daily plates, what they've got to cook. That's one of the things. And another thing is we all miss something of home. And when you're a new migrant, you're thinking of home, but you have made another country your home. So, you've got to balance the two. Now, how am I going to really survive in this place? I've got to probably maybe, English was not my language, so I've got to go to classes for English. And that's going to be difficult because your home language is something else. So you need that push from someone else to guide you through that. And another thing is, that comfort, that joy, and that sense of community, that sense of belonging. You want to belong in the place that you have chosen your home. And sometimes that is very difficult for one. It takes time. I know it took me time to settle in Ballarat. So the migrants going to go through that as well. And they are going through that till today.
Yeah. That's a really valid point. Sorry, Chez, continue.
Bobby, if I could add, in terms of the change which just came to me, when I came here in '69, there wasn't a lot of multicultural food. And in 1972, the Eureka Pizza Shop was set up. And that just blew the whole multicultural food out of the water. It was just amazing. And now, you can't go past a shop without it being multicultural food. So that's been the most dramatic change that I've witnessed in the time that I've been here, really. And of course, the acceptance of all multicultural people, African community, and so forth. So that's been probably the biggest change that I've witnessed. Yeah.
Yeah, and all that variety of food's also blown my waistline as well, so it's not all
That
good.
goes with the course.
That goes with the course, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I guess listening to both of you, when I think about my own experiences, so I moved from the UK here, and this will be my 11th year now. And I think back to Mum, who had moved from India to the UK, and she also didn't speak the language. So I'm just sort of really thinking now about the isolation that people can feel, especially when the kids go to school, or maybe when the partner goes to work, and when you're left there in a strange place, you can't communicate, and it can be really, really lonely and isolating. So, it's a real difficult challenge. And for me, moving here to Australia 11 years ago, knowing the language, being a pharmacist, being a professional, knowing that I can converse with people around my profession and what I need to do, but still the massive void from not having that familiarity with a place, not knowing where to go, not knowing which phone service or which internet service is reputable, not knowing which supermarket is, going to have, good products or better products or a better range of products, simple things like that. So I think at every step of the journey, and no matter where you enter that journey, no matter what you bring in terms of your bag of experience and knowledge, there's going to be a really steep slope of learning at every level. And I think that is really important that we bear in mind that no matter where people come from, whether or not they can speak the language, whether or not they're degree level educated or not, or whatever their level of education might be. I know you mentioned it, Mita, at the beginning. Regardless of all of that, all people will need that support. It's just going to vary in terms of what they need, okay? But we have to provide that support ultimately. Thank you. That was really, really insightful. So they're the experiences of two of our panelists who've been in Ballarat for quite some time. Now, what I really want to do is ask Ita, because Ita, obviously you've been here since 2015, and I'm keen on your insights and how they might vary from what we've heard from Chez and Meeta. So as you settled in Ballarat, obviously you had the love of your life with you, and for sure that would have made things a little bit easier, especially since he was local from Creswick, I think you said. But what were the difficulties that you faced in that whole period of settling into Ballarat?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that I used to work in Jakarta. So the first year I settled here in Ballarat is just, I'm wanting that life back. So I want to have a career here in Australia, and I tried to apply so many jobs at the start because of not knowing what sort of resume acceptable here in Australia. I just used my Indonesian versions of resume, which is I translated to English, and it actually wasn't helping me much until I got so many refusal, rejections, and it was really hard for me because, like Bobby said, when the kid go to school, when my husband go to work, I just sitting alone in my living room and not knowing where to talk to, and then not having any friends, and just video call with my sister, with my mom back home, and that's it. And then my husband helped me actually browsing to help me out to get my employment pathway, and luckily we got here in City of Ballarat have a employment pathway programs, and then he encouraged me to come, and then yeah, since I come, I surprised that a lot of migrants background people joined, and I love not having the outcome, but the journey itself, knowing and meeting new people from different cultural background and learning something new. That's the process that I really enjoyed, and I was one of the luckiest to get a full-time employment here locally in Ballarat, and yeah, I can't never be grateful enough with the City of Ballarat. Thank you. So yeah, that's my challenge because I was living here in the last 6 years. So and I'm still like in a productive age. So my focus was to having a career. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Ita.
Thank you.
Luna, I want to come to you next because your story is really captivating and really interesting, and I love the way you describe that journey on the plane and going into the unknown, which I guess all of us have taken that journey into the unknown, to some extent. But yours is fascinating. What I want to know, because your story was quite positive in terms of what you told us, but I'm sure that under all that development and the fact you had mentors and opportunities, there would have been challenges for sure for you. What were some of those challenges?
Well, the biggest one would have been the racism, because in primary school, well, early high school as well, most of the time it was either 3 or 4 African kids in the whole school. Well, one, especially in the classroom, each class will be one. So a lot of the other kids, well, a lot of the Australian-born kids didn't really interact with you at the very start, because, you couldn't really speak much English, and, I'm not sure what they were thinking at the time, but, they've never seen, an African kid before, so there was a lot going on. So there was, a lot of, I guess, like there was racial slurs and stuff like that through school, or walking home from training, people would just drive their cars by, roll down the window, yell something out. But most of the time, I just ignored them and walked past. And there was one time where, after it, that's when I realized it wasn't really a big deal. I was walking down Little Bridge Street. I think it might have been around 2015, 16. And someone came past just yelling some stuff out. And I just kept walking. They drove by. A few minutes later, they came back up and had the window rolled down. And it looked like they were going to throw like a glass bottle or something. But the driver was rolling the window up. So as the passenger threw it, it kind of like bounced off the window and like crashed in the car, which, well, it didn't crash the car, but like it smashed in the car. And that's when I knew like racism in Ballarat was not a big deal, and it wasn't going to be a big deal going forward. So just little stuff like that were probably the biggest challenges, and also at the very start, finding those services as well, like knowing, you know, where to go for certain things. Like, Mum didn't really know the best way to, you know, get help for us as kids, you know, but we were pretty independent, which is good, because in the refugee camp, you know, as a kid, you had to be independent. So, yeah, it was a challenge at the start, but now I don't feel like it is, and especially since my little sister, who was born here, she goes to school and she's never experienced that now. Like, she walks home from her little activities and her dance classes, and she's never experienced that once. So it has changed and it has improved a lot.
Yeah,
which is
fantastic. No, that's really encouraging to hear. So, and also interesting to hear how some of your experiences in the refugee camp really helped to prepare you for life, you know, so far away from that refugee camp, in a totally different environment. Yet, you know, those learnings again shows, you know, there's learnings everywhere, and you never know when you're going to be able to use those learnings in a different part of your life. So thank you. That was, yeah, fantastic to hear. And in terms of the question I asked, Chez, did you feel then, with that independence and with that experience from the refugee camp, I asked Chez if he felt he had to step up and fill that void with his parents. Did you have to do that with yours then?
At the start, my older brother and sister, Lamret, Odette and Elma, they, you know, pretty much had control of that, translating for Mum, you know, taking her shopping, especially Lamret. She's been around Mum, you know, for so long, especially when some of the older siblings moved away. Some are in Brisbane, some are in Melbourne, some was in Cairns. Yeah, she really stepped up, but now they've all left and I'm the only one still here with Mum. So now I have all those responsibilities. But I never feel like it's a burden because Mum, you know, for most of my life, it was just her. She took us from a refugee camp here, you know, and till now, and she looked after all of us pretty well. You know, we're all in pretty good shape, nothing, you know, no bad medical conditions or anything. So she's done such an extremely amazing job to the point where I feel like, you know, I've kind of have to be there whenever she needs. Yeah, so that's how I look into it. And especially since my older siblings have done so much as well for her, they expect the same of not just me, but the younger ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You have that responsibility to continue. Good. And what an amazing woman your mum must be. I mean, that's a really brave decision to just move to the other side of the world on your own, let alone taking, you know, a number of young children with you. Can you imagine how scary and difficult that must have been, especially not knowing the language? So very, very powerful. Thank you for that, Luna.
Yeah.
Karissa, we're going to come to you next. Now, obviously, from what we've heard from the stories of Ballarat in the past and, you know, 20 years ago to more recent times, there has been some changes. And some of those changes, I think we would all accept, include the fact that, you know, it's a real melting pot now here in Ballarat. You know, there's a lot of different languages, there's a lot of different cultures, and there's a lot of different religions as well. And while we know that multiculturalism is all about a lot of cultures living side by side, what do you think we can do here in the city of Ballarat to actually move one step beyond that? Rather than having people living side by side, how do we actually get them to integrate and become one harmonious pool of people? What can the city of Ballarat do, or what would you like to see happen that could really, you know, improve that social inclusivity here in Ballarat?
Yeah, I think it's pretty difficult because I mean, obviously in this room we're very diverse and all very accepting of each other and quite connected. But if I go out on the street, I wouldn't say that it's very diverse. You see a few multicultural people, but I don't know if I would say like representation is probably a huge thing. I know that there's the Intercultural Ambassador program, but in my experience, I don't see it that much. You don't see multicultural people on billboards. Even at my school, there weren't that many people. Like all the international students were primarily Chinese, and they were still very separated from the rest of the students. And I think it's probably exposure is one thing. Also, just students coming from other countries being able to find a space where they feel comfortable to integrate more with the community, but also finding people that are willing to welcome them. I still think there's a pretty big divide in terms of like newcomers to Australia, and there are people that are really welcoming and there are people that are not. And kind of finding that balance between them, I think, is really important.
And look, that's an interesting point. I think places can be cliquey, and it can be hard to sort of break through when people have got established friendships and networks, and here you are suddenly, you know, someone new to the city. How do you actually get yourself into that network? And that can be a real challenge. I mean, for some, it can be made a little bit easier if you know somebody who's already part of that network and then has become, you know, a family member or a partner. But in other cases where you don't have that, it can be extremely difficult. Work is another way that you can really embed yourself into a network. And I know for me, coming here, and the only thing I really had was work, that was huge for me, having that network of people at work who were then able to open up different avenues and introduce me to different people. But again, like Karissa says, that's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to do that. Some are happy doing that. Others are, well, you know what? I'm quite happy with my network and I'm quite busy and I really I haven't got time to do the whole hand holding with you. So it can be really, really difficult. And the other thing that I really want to ask you about is the fact that sometimes we can put ourselves in a position where we expect everybody else to make changes to accommodate us. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I want to ask you, and I guess all 5 of you here, are well integrated in our community. That's why you're here. What have you done personally that has made it easier for you to integrate into the local area? So Karissa, I'll ask you.
I'd say, I'll answer your question, but I'd say like for the majority of my life I was quite isolated. Like I'm an only child, my dad was always working. I grew up separated from my culture and I've kind of had to parent myself in that respect, in terms of teaching myself my culture, which is hard. Coming to Ballarat, I was still very isolated, and I still am today, I'd say. But I find myself in multicultural friendship groups. I'm not Chinese enough for the Chinese clique, I'm not Australian enough for the Australian clique, so I've always just found myself where no one fits in, so we all fit in with each other. And I guess that kind of moved in through my work with CMY. It's like I wasn't welcomed into the Chinese Association. Not that they were like, no, you can't be here, but just through actions, I felt like I wasn't welcome there. And that's why like a multicultural space is kind of where I felt like I belonged, because everyone belongs there. You can't not be multicultural. And that's why I've just kind of put all my effort into finding spaces where I've felt like I belonged, and that just being in multicultural spaces where everyone's kind of different and sharing their own experiences, and I've just put all my effort into just volunteering and helping people out, and in turn they kind of give me opportunities to move up in like leadership areas and represent young people in Ballarat, and through that I've just been able to connect myself that way, just by kind of putting my head down and just putting my hand up for all the opportunities that come my way.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, you know, that's the message I really wanted to get out of the panel today, is the fact that there's steps that we can all take ourselves as well to make those opportunities come to us, to make sure we're in the right place for those opportunities as well. And I think you've highlighted that beautiful. Okay, so look, I think we are running out of time, so we're going to speed up a little bit. I've just got a couple more questions very quickly. And the first one is pretty much in terms of what's happening at the moment. Over the last 18 to 24 months, of course, a pandemic has caused disruption to lives all over the planet. Now here, in terms of what's happened with the pandemic, how do you think your communities can really contribute to recovery and healing after this really devastating period of time, not just for people living here, but for those people who've moved from countries where that devastation has really been quite extreme? I mean, despite what we see in the news here in Australia, we really are very lucky compared to what's been happening in many places. Mita, I might ask you, because obviously, you know, I know you're of Indian heritage, and you've got, and we know India was one of the places that was really badly hit. How can we help recovery of people here in Ballarat based on what's happened?
I think there have been a lot of messages with reference to COVID, but personally, I have lost family members due to COVID, and it is a serious disease, so to say. It's a pandemic, you know, it's a bad virus. And, you know, when I talk to people and I tell them I've lost family members due to COVID, you know, it kind of opens their eye. Okay, no, this is for real. And I know I come from South Africa, it's been bad over there as well, and I've got great concerns for my mother because she's all by herself over there. So there's this continuous worry about her, you know, she's got to be safe, look after herself. And over here, sometimes we are a little negligent, so to say, you know, we are not taking it serious. The rest of the world is doing it bad. You know, let's get vaccinated. Let's take that precaution. Let's be safe. And what we can do is we can knock on our neighbor and ask them, are they doing okay? Give them some moral support, because we are all doing it tough.
Absolutely.
We are all doing it tough. Let's have some compassion, some understanding. And you know, we all are going to get through to at the end of the tunnel with this. So let's protect ourselves.
Thank you, Mita. Really important message there. Now, final question I've got is about the future. We've spoken about the past, we've spoken about the present with the pandemic and how that's affected us. I really want to just now do a bit of gazing into the future, if you like. And Chez, I'm going to start with you. If I was to ask you, what would be the one change that you would, and it's only one, I'm going to push you on this and just limit you to the one. What's the one change, you've got two of you, what's the one change that you would like to see in Ballarat over the next 10 years?
I would like to see more diversity in our city council. At the moment, I think we've got 9 Anglo-Saxon council. I'd like to see more diversity there. And I would like to see us pay more respect to our natural assets, to the point that we should give legal rights to our rivers and our mountains and our lakes, you know, so that we can actually defend them. So, you know, I think that's what we should be doing, and Ballarat should lead the way in that. So, yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Mita, same question to you. One thing. You're only allowed one thing. What is that one thing that you would like to see change in Ballarat over the next decade?
Right. I would love to see more halal restaurants here in Ballarat because it's really hard to get it. Yeah, that's the one that I would love to see in the next decade. Thanks.
Topic very close to my heart as well, food. Very supportive of that. And finally, Luna, I will ask you the same question. One change in the decade, what would it be?
For me, it would be, I guess, there's 2 parts to it. I know you said one, but there's 2 parts of one. Is with the young people, and the one part is the mental health. The mental health, not just service providers, but like the whole policies and stuff around that needs to have a little tweak, especially towards the multicultural community, because a lot of the multicultural communities, when we come here, like where I'm from, mental health isn't a big thing. Like we acknowledge that it exists, which a lot of other places do, but they don't really do much towards it or teach you anything about it. So when you get here, you come with that mindset that it's not a big thing, it's this and that. So a bit more on that, and I guess having that diversity with those mental health providers as well, because you feel a lot more connected if someone's same origin or close to it as you, giving you that support instead of someone that has no relations to you in any sort of way or even looks remotely like you. I think that's one way to do it. And the other part is with the jobs. Coming out of this pandemic, young people, we've been struck just as hard as anyone else, because a lot of those small businesses and stuff that were closed, most times it's the young people that work there. They're the ones on the ground actually working there, in the hospitality. So coming out of there, just having ways that roles like that can be more secure for young people, or having organizations, which I know a lot of boards have been doing, where they've always included at least one youth officer role or something like that. I think that needs to be in the wider community there, in like businesses, in council, in everyday life. There needs to be a space where there's always that one space reserved for a young person to learn from the company or the business.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think with ambassadors, young ambassadors like yourself, Luna, and Karissa, I think the future is certainly going to be bright over at least the next 10 years and hopefully beyond that as well. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If we'd like to give a round of applause to our wonderful panellists today. And a nice link into our next topic. I think Mita touched on the real importance of being compassionate. And what I want to talk to now and introduce our next speaker is all about compassion. And I'm going to introduce you to someone who's going to talk to us in some depth about Compassionate Ballarat, which is part of the Global Charter of Compassion, comprising over 430 cities around the world, working to make the world a more compassionate place. And never has that been more important than today. Now, Compassionate Ballarat was initiated by Dr. Lynne Reeder in 2017, and Dr. Reeder is an adjunct research fellow at Federation University, the School of Health and Life Sciences, as well as director of the Public Interest think tank. Founder of the Mindful Futures Network, the national lead of the Australian Compassion Council, a member of the Australian Compassion Council, and a member of the Compassionate Ballarat Steering Group. In these roles, she writes and conducts research. Her most recent research project is a randomised controlled trial of the early childhood program Think Equal, which she and her academic colleagues did in conjunction with the Centre for Emotional Intelligence at Yale University. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Lynne Reeder. Get out of your way.
So thank you very much, Bobby. On behalf of the Compassionate Ballarat Steering Group, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to provide a reflection now on threading our stories together as part of this important Intercultural Cities Australasian Summit. We are very honoured. I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous lands on which we are situated, the Wathaurong lands, paying respects to elders past, present and emerging, by recognising that we explore the rhythm of this land by listening to the echoes of its ancient culture. As Bobby just said, Compassionate Ballarat is part of the Global Charter for Compassion, which is both a document and a movement that urges us all to embrace the core value of compassion. As he said, there are over 430 cities around the world that have signed the Charter, and the Ballarat City Council formally signed the Charter in 2019. And we are very pleased to work with the Council on a number of citywide initiatives, including this very important Intercultural Cities Summit. We are here today in the Art Gallery of Ballarat, and certainly compassion is well recognised in the arts, because it is our creative selves that open us up to the wonder and awe that surround us. I love that story of Luna, imagining he was coming to live in the clouds. So that wonder and awe is a really important component of our experience of wonderment. And studies have shown that that's important because it can make us feel part of something larger than ourselves, fostering empathy and the ability to understand the experience of others, as we've heard today. I've really enjoyed the stories that I've heard by the panel members, and that's because stories tell us who we are. Stories celebrate what is enriching and important in life. Indeed, they demonstrate compassion in action. Stories demonstrate compassion in action by connecting us to our common humanity. Storytelling requires us to go on an internal journey to search the deeper parts of ourselves. And while no two stories are alike, as we have heard here today, Mita said, I couldn't see anyone else that looked like me. The art of storytelling is universal. Stories unite, humanise and heal us. Indeed, stories bring us home. Imagination is central to storytelling and is also a core ingredient of compassion, because our ability to wonder about is the conduit to access the world of someone other than ourselves. Compassion is not only an act of imagination, but also another kind of imagination, one that is not only part of the way we think, but also part of the way we sense and experience others. When we feel compassion, we connect emotionally and viscerally. The connection between compassion and imagination is also the connection between imagination and the human experience. And the science of compassion is important because studies are finding that cultivating compassion and pro-social motivations are associated with improved well-being and the development of more ethical and social environments. There is considerable evidence now that when people are caring towards others and feel cared for by others, their physical and mental health improves. And I'll just give you one example of the work of Compassionate Ballarat and the way that we apply compassion through stories. So just 2 weeks ago, we launched a collection of stories of compassion by young students across Ballarat. And we asked these students, what were the things that what were the issues that they were responding to? And some of these children were just from about 7 to 16. And one little girl said, after losing my poppy to cancer, I knew I wanted to make a difference, so no one else would have to go through the same pain and suffering. Another young person said, I saw homeless people sleeping on the side of the street, looking cold and lonely by themselves. I could not understand why people were walking past without even looking at them. And two lovely young children said they met Nancy on a walk, and they were worried that she was, when she was walking home to Soldiers Hill, she was on a walker, and they were worried that the footpaths were very bumpy, and said, what if Nancy tripped over? So they actually walked her all the way home. So we're hoping that these stories are cultivating the sorts of students here in Ballarat that are going to support, a better understanding and connection to everyone else in Ballarat. So at one level, this book of stories could simply be seen as a nice thing. But indeed, recent research has found that our ability to see and take action to alleviate the suffering in others actually supports our own mental health. Studies have found that people who choose to act compassionately during stressful situations seem to have a more durable sense of well-being. And this has been the important work of this Intercultural City Summit here today, to connect through imagination by seeing the humanity in everyone around them. It's exciting that Ballarat is Australia's first intercultural city, and this event has been a wonderful contribution to the thinking on how we can all more deeply relate to each other across our cultural foundations. So thank you, Francis, and the organising team for the opportunity you have afforded Compassionate Ballarat to finish this day with a reflection on why our stories are important. and why threading those stories together with compassion is even more important. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a great way to conclude today's ICC Australasian Summit. It was just really a great way to wrap things up, Lynne, and I really appreciate your words. I'd also like to thank the panel. It was so interesting listening to the panel today, and of course our other guests throughout the day, Dr. Deanne Gilson, with that fantastic welcome to country, Nikki Foy with her acknowledgement of country prior to this session, and Andita, and the team here at the Ballarat Art Gallery as well, Art Gallery of Ballarat, for all their assistance behind the scenes. They've done a lot of work behind the scenes, and the team at SLC as well, who've been live streaming the event today. Thanks, Craig and Paul and Mitchell and the team there. Really appreciate your help as well. So that concludes today's festivities. One last thing, we've got some gifts to thank our panellists. Take one and pass it on, Chez. One for you, and I'll pass it out. I might get Luna and Karissa, and I've got one for you as well. Thanks, Lynne. There you go, Dimitri. Can you pass it on? And I'd also like to thank the rest of the Intercultural Services team, Francis, Dimitri, Yvonne, and Lisa as well. And thanks for our guests coming along today. And that concludes today's summit. Thank you.